Hello and welcome to Gadget Joe, and today I have one simple question for you. Can your case do this?
Wow.
Is that one red?
Today we have a case that has been around for a little while now, but it's still in high demand and remains a very, very unique and special case indeed. And I want to find out if the hype is still worth it. What we have here is a Hyte Y70 Touch, not to be confused with the Y70 Touch Infinite, which features a slightly lower resolution screen. I'll expand more on that later on in the video. This is going to be quite a long video too, as we've got quite a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get right into it. It is a huge case, as you can physically see, but it has a lot of cool tricks and design features that make it a formidable offering in what is effectively a very flooded case market. It's not a cheap case, however, by any means. The Touch model we have here, with the 4K display included, is very hard to come by nowadays, but when you can find them, they sell for around the £350 to £400 price point. You can get the newer Touch Infinite model with a 2.5K display for around the same sort of price. And if you don't want or need a screen at all, you can get it with just a glass panel replacing where the display sits for around about the £200 price point. Now, before we dive into the full specifications of the case and its features, let's address the display. The model I have here is the Y70 Touch, that features a first gen display, a 14.1 inch 1100 by 3840 4K panel with a 60Hz refresh rate, a 10-point multi-touch capacitive touchscreen, meaning it will still register up to 10 points of contact at any one time. It does have a brightness of 300 nits, which is the lowest of the three options of the displays available. There is a second and third gen offering of the display too that share similar specs with some slightly different functions. The second gen is a 14.5 inch 688 by 2560 2.5K panel with a 60Hz refresh rate. This one has a lower 5-point multi-touch screen, but a brighter 350 nits brightness and a slightly higher contrast ratio too. The third gen display is an even larger 14.9 inch 682 by 2560 2.5K panel with once again a 60Hz refresh rate. The brightness is now at an impressive 500 nits, but has a slightly lower contrast ratio. However, this new one goes back to a 10-point multi-touch display. Both the first and third gen share a 30 millisecond pixel response time, and the second gen has a faster 20 millisecond pixel response time. I know this all sounds a bit of a flustercluck, but there are reasons behind the madness. The original first gen 4K display that we have here sold insanely quick, so much so that getting hold of the display panels became an almost impossible task for Hyte. The solution was to look into an alternative in an attempt to be able to fulfill sales. The second gen and the third gen might sound like a bit of a drop when you consider that they drop from a 4K resolution to 2.5K resolution, but they more than made up for it in brightness and in physical size, but most importantly with the availability. The 2.5K displays are much more attainable and readily available for Hyte to use when they need them. Considering the tiny screen size, the resolution really didn't make that much of a difference visually. 2.5K or 4K both look absolutely phenomenal at this size, and they really deliver an incredible experience, especially considering it's attached to a case. The displays can function as a standalone monitor too, so they are capable of displaying literally anything you want to display on it, which sets it apart from other cases on the market with screens that are often limited to only showing preset information with maybe a few variables here and there. The Y70 is definitely a real show-off piece too, and it's always going to get people talking when they see it. Hyte are very much known for producing showpieces that are so bold and out there that they get your interest and get the conversation flowing, and the Y70 Touch that we have here definitely does that. The display is controlled via the Nexus app. That can be downloaded onto your PC to control exactly what you want to display on the screen. It has a huge library of apps and widgets that you can customize to exactly what you want to have displayed. You can have photo or video slideshows, real-time monitoring, calculators, and so much more. You can even display chat from your stream via shortcuts to streaming apps like Twitch and so on. You can control your music and so much more. It really is a well thought out system that is incredibly intuitive to use. Connecting the display to your setup is simple too. On the bottom of the expansion slots at the rear of the case is a little panel with a DisplayPort connector. What you need to do is connect the included cable, which is nice and short, into this port, and then the other end into the graphics card next to it. And this will then allow the display to display the images as a monitor. Power is provided via this USB-C port at the rear of the display panel, which feeds through the top of the case and into the rear, to a double connector, one being the SATA connector to provide the power, and a separate USB 2 connector, which I'm presuming is to provide the connectivity for the touch controls of the panel. This will cause the display to function as its own standalone monitor, and will show your Windows desktop just like your usual monitor would, almost making it like a gigantic all-in-one system. You're going to need to make sure that you change your display settings within the display menu to make this a secondary display, and your normal monitor the main display. Do this before downloading the Nexus app and you're pretty much good to go. The Nexus app is incredibly intuitive too. Once you've got the software, which can be found on the Hyte website, then it will give you the options to log in or register. Then to calibrate your display to ensure the correct display is optimized for touch controls. Once in, you have a huge range of options for customizations, and by this point, you will have noticed that the display on your case has come to life. Here you can change everything from all the different widgets on the screen. You can store multiple pages on the display too, so the possibilities are nigh on endless. You can have Twitch chat running on it, control programs like OBS, even have a block game, which is effectively Tetris, but you know, copyright and all that. Then you can add shortcuts to your favorite apps, and there are so many options here. You can add calculators, galleries, weather apps, performance monitors, clocks, URLs to websites, lighting controls, etc. And then you can customize your theme by using the top left panel here, and you get some pre-installed ones, or you can create your own color schemes at the bottom of this page. As you can see, the screen looks super clear and effective. The app makes the screen an incredibly useful tool, although be warned that block game is incredibly addictive and even more so very distracting from what I'm supposed to be doing. My kids ended up becoming rather obsessed with it, and even my grandson Arlo was enjoying it too. Now that we've had a good deep look at the display panel, we can turn our attention to the case itself, and the Y70 has some very interesting design features built in. As I mentioned earlier, this is an expensive case. Even without the display, it will set you back about 200 quid, so let's see if it can justify the price tag. The case itself is huge. If you have a small desk or not much room to spare, then you will want to avoid this like the plague. If you have plenty of space and want something that will be as much of a statement piece as the PC itself, then keep watching. The overall dimensions come in at 470mm tall, 470mm deep, and 320mm wide. It has a total volume of 70.7 litres of space inside. It is, however, relatively lightweight considering its size. I mean, it's definitely got some weight to it, but I've reviewed smaller cases that are much heavier than this. It's got a pretty unique design to it. Granted, there are loads of cases on the market currently with glass panels on the front and side, and they all carry a similar resemblance, and with a considerably lower price tag. But this time we have the party piece in this angled piece on the front, which is of course the display. The display takes the entirety of the panel too, albeit with a little bit of a bezel around it, but it fits in so nicely and looks absolutely fantastic. It features a dual chamber design, which makes the case pretty wide. They have, however, taken this into consideration when it comes to airflow, because as you can see on the top and the rear side, there is ventilation almost everywhere they can fit it in. It has a unique angled line design on it too, which is reflective of the space inside. The lines do a good job of representing the direction of the airflow within. Cases with glass panels have come a long way in terms of ventilation with adapted airflow routes. They will naturally always fall slightly below the airflow performance of a case with a front mesh or grille style pattern to it, but they are definitely making great strides in catering for this. Removing the panels is pretty simple. The larger glass panels simply pop out and they are held in place by pop sockets. The rear and top panels also pop out in a similar manner. The front glass panel, however, does need a screwdriver to remove the two small screws that are tucked inside underneath where the rear panel would be sat. Once you've removed them, you can remove that panel. The panels are all nicely assembled too. They are manufactured using a really thin piece of sheet metal that is enveloping a thicker piece of plastic underneath to give it a bit of a substantial feel. You can already begin to see the little touches of unique customization and branding that Hyte like to incorporate in their products here with the designs on the rear of the panels. The Y70 is classed as actually a mid-tower chassis despite its huge size, with support for ITX, M80X, ATX all the way up to E80X motherboards. The motherboard tray sits about 4 inches proud into the chassis thanks to the dual chamber design. Here you can see more of the quirky little touches Hyte have added in with the oddly shaped rear motherboard cutout and then the Hyte logo poking out behind it. There are 7 expansion slots on a Y70, which is pretty common. What isn't so common is that they're only half length for shorter cards, but it does have 4 additional vertical full-length expansion slots for full-size graphics cards, and they have even included one of their PCIe Gen 4 risers right out of the box to allow you to vertically mount your graphics card within the case. It would be nice to see more options to have it mounted traditionally, but I suppose with a bit of tinkering it could be done, but then with the design of the case it warrants a vertically mounted card to show off your hardware. If you do not want to have a vertically mounted graphics card in your system, I would probably personally recommend avoiding this case, with all the limitations given to you in terms of no real traditional horizontal graphics card mounting options. I just want to take a moment away from the original video itself, as unfortunately this video was originally scheduled to be released a couple of weeks ago. But the riser on my unit developed a fault that effectively shorted my 3080 Ti, causing it to develop a power arc issue. This is unfortunately something that can happen with any hardware, and while it would be easy for me to go off on a tangent and directly blame Hyte for this, it would be completely irresponsible of me to do this. Especially in my line of work, I am all too aware that issues like this can happen randomly. It's unfortunate that this has happened, but after contacting Hyte about the issue, they were quick to offer a replacement for the riser, and the new riser is working perfectly. So I do have to give them their dues, but they did come back to me quickly with somewhat of a solution. Please don't think that just because I was unfortunate to have this happen to me, that it will happen to you. But I also would be doing you guys a disservice if I wasn't completely honest in my findings and didn't report to you the incident that happened. Despite the inconvenience it's caused in getting the video out sooner, it's an issue that has been rectified, and it was, as mentioned, sorted very quickly and promptly, which also gives credit to Hyte for their response. It is reassuring at the very least that Hyte were relatively proactive in offering a replacement. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the original review video now. I'm not saying this to try and give you a negative opinion of a case that we're looking at, and hopefully this hasn't impacted your decision on this case, as like I discussed, it seems like it was a very isolated, unfortunate case. Rather disappointingly, there are no fans included with the Y70 Touch, which for the price point of nearly 400 quid seems an odd decision to make. But there's plenty of space for mounting lots of fans within the chassis. In fact, underneath the bottom of the case inside, you will notice that there is some space for mounting fans inside it. A rather unique but clever little idea for putting fans in and keeping them out of view but still getting the benefits of the airflow from them whilst keeping the build nice and clean. In terms of fan compatibility, we have space on the bottom, or rather in the bottom, for up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans. On the side there is space for 3 120 or 2 140mm fans, and at the rear you have either a 120 or 140mm, and then at the top you can have up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans once again. There's also plenty of space for radiators, with a maximum 360 or 280 on the top with a thickness of up to 68mm, or you can mount one on the side, also up to 360 or 280, but this time round you can fit a radiator up to 125mm in thickness. There is loads of room inside the case for even the biggest of components too, with up to 180mm available for a CPU cooler, 422mm for the graphics card with a maximum thickness of 105mm and a maximum power supply length of 235mm. On the front, situated at the bottom of the case, is the I/O panel, and this compromises of a dual function mic and audio port, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports capable of 5 gigabit transfer speed on either side of the LED backlit power button, and then finally a Type-C 3.2 Gen 2 port capable of 10 gigabit speed. The dual audio input port certainly looks cleaner with just the one port, but what do you do if you want to use both audio output and mic input? Hyte have included a dual adapter to make this work. However, in my opinion, I think this is a strange tactic, as the dual adapter makes things look a bit messy. It works nonetheless, and it's nice that they've included it. I just don't think it would have been that much of an issue to put two ports on the front I/O. Moving to the rear side of the case, you get a large open space thanks to its generous dual chamber design. There is space for the power supply at the bottom with a little mount to hold it into position here. There's plenty of space for cable management behind here too, and you get plenty of cable tie points around the back of the tray too to tidy everything up. They also include some additional Velcro straps and cable ties within the accessories box too for additional cable tidying. Here you will see two oddly shaped metal trays sticking out of the back of the case with the Hyte logos on them. These are the storage caddies or trade caddies, and you can get access to these by the back of the case. Here you have two panels labelled storage that are held in by thumb screws. Remove them and you have the trays at your disposal. Despite its huge size, the Y70 is limited in terms of storage bays. Each one of these two trays will hold either a full-size 3.5-inch drive or two 2.5-inch drives. The little logo cutouts within them though are nice to see, and yet again another little nod to the Hyte branding. Focusing on the back of the case, we can see it's pretty much what you would expect for a dual chamber case. You can begin to appreciate the wideness of the case from here too. There are a couple of interesting little additions to the Y70 that are worthy of a mention, and that is of the fan mount, which at both the top and bottom are held into place by thumb screws. Remove the thumb screws and you get two removable trays that are ideal for mounting the fans directly to them, so you're not having to dig into the case to do so. This way you can simply install them outside of the case and then pop the panel back in and secure into place again. The panels are a bit thin and flimsy, so be careful not to bend them, but once they're in place and secured, they're not going to move at all. What's more is that when you remove the top one, you now have a huge amount of access to the top of the case. This is especially useful for when installing the CPU power connector or coolers on your motherboard, so that you are not squeezing yourself into a tight space. In fact, if you remove both glass panels and this top panel, you now have an enormous amount of accessible space to utilise. These came in particularly useful when installing a system into the case. Overall, the building process in Hyte Y70 is a pretty pleasurable experience. There's loads of room to get your hands into and have access from different angles. The rubber grommets, although good for keeping things looking tidy, were a little bit of a pain to work around. They're really quite stiff, but you can remove the entire rubber gasket system if you do so wish. Personally, I would recommend keeping it in, as overall it keeps it looking much cleaner, but it's nice to have that option to remove it if you do so wish and you struggle with using it. Mounting the fans was super simple, thanks to that tray removal. The vertically mounted graphics card is very nice to see, especially thanks to the solid design of their included riser bracket. There's space for up to a quad slot graphics card too, which is just insane. Although, I imagine it would probably end up choking the airflow a little bit on a quad panel card, with the glass panel being so close. But even my pretty large 3080 Ti looked quite compact in there. There were, however, a couple of niggly bits, like the fact that the display panel connector that sits at the bottom of the case does kind of obstruct the access to the pins at the bottom of the motherboard when using an ATX board like I did, so you'll need to be careful when plugging it in. It's especially useful if you don't have King Charles sausage fingers like mine. Secondly is the PCIe riser. Whilst you could make things significantly easier by removing the whole thing, if you do it like I did, with everything still installed, you're going to need to tie the top of the riser somewhere out of the way to get the motherboard in. I did use a zip tie for this, although admittedly I probably did make it a little bit harder for myself. But it's worth noting that if you're going to be building in this, to just tie that out of the way if you're not willing to take the whole thing out. It really would have been nice to see some fans included, especially for the price point. They wouldn't even need to be anything special, so take that into consideration if you're looking to buy this, as you'll then need to spend a bit more to get some additional fans to fully take advantage of the airflow capabilities of this case to its maximum potential. With that said, I did find that the airflow has been fantastic for my little setup, and temps remain nice and stable even with all the glass panels in place, and only using a 240mm radiator on the AIO. It can be a noisy case, especially if you take advantage of all 10 available fan spaces, but if you were particular and chose the right fans, it could be a pretty silent setup. The display is also absolutely fantastic. It's so functional, flexible and customizable. It's so useful to have for multitasking. Just showing off high quality photos and videos, the resolution overall is absolutely perfect. A 4K panel of this size makes everything look super fresh, crispy and sharp. Despite its relatively low brightness rating, it's plenty bright enough for what it is. It's great for running chat on it during streaming or watching streaming, etc. The lower resolution variants that are available for this case should still be incredibly useful and easily sharp and clear enough. In fact, even a 1080p panel of this size would absolutely look incredible. So that pretty much sums up my review of the Hyte Y70 Touch, and what do I think of it? Well, the display is wildly over the top, wildly extravagant, and probably not really needed, but it's also a fantastic thing to have too. It's incredibly useful and practical when utilised properly. It's genuinely mind-blowing to think that the quality of this display is better than most monitors on the market. On top of that, it's just insanely cool. I challenge anybody to walk in on a system with this case on and the display going to not be amazed and instantly drawn to it. The case itself also looks fantastic. Yes, it's very big and bulky, but it makes up for it in space inside. It's super easy to build in. Airflow is great considering it's got two big glass panels and a display panel, and obviously the little touches for cable tidying, hiding the fans in a little compartment at the bottom, the rubber grommets for the cable, and all the little Hyte logos and unique aesthetic designs are a nice little touch. The build quality feels good, not incredible, but it's very good considering its weight. The riser cable is very nicely manufactured. It feels like a premium product, and whilst vertically mounting a graphics card won't be to everybody's taste, it definitely looks good when you do it. Obviously we have the black variant here, but it comes in white too, and also black and red. So if you wanted a different colour, the options are out there. I guess the burning question is, do I think that the Hyte Y70 Touch is worth the near £400 price tag? I'm going to say yes and no. It's all a matter of perspective. It's a fantastically well thought out case with some interesting little quirks and features, but then there are a lot of cases on the market that do very similar for much, much lower prices. And the fact that you don't get fans is incredibly disappointing. I know I have mentioned this multiple times in this video, but a small detail that could be adapted pretty easily, especially when some cases have multiple fans included for a fraction of a price. But then the screen in the same argument more than makes up for it. On paper, it's a tiny 4K monitor, and it shouldn't be worth the price tag of just £200 for just the display alone, considering you can get a Y70 without the display for £200. But when you see how well it's been optimised for the case, it instantly increases its value. The biggest factor here is that you need to be able to utilise that screen. If you're looking for a case to show off, then this is the one for you. If you're looking for a case that you can use the screen to take advantage of its functionalities such as stream chat, shortcuts, etc., then it's ideal for you. However, if you're simply going to have the case set up and not utilise that screen or hide it away somewhere, then you will be better off looking elsewhere, or even opting for the standard Y70, which is effectively the same case without the screen for just a smidge over half the price. Or even better yet, look at the Y60, which is essentially the same thing once again, for even cheaper. The Nexus software is fantastic and makes the display insanely intuitive and actually genuinely useful. It's been on the market now for well over a year, and it has still retained its price point and desirability. In fact, these cases are generally very sought after, so that speaks volumes on its own too. As always, I will leave a link to this case if you do so wish to get one. Bear in mind it might not be the first gen 4K display that we have here, but if I can find one I will link that too. Even the 2.5K display is worth the price point. Whilst you're down there checking out that link, don't forget to click like and leave a comment about what you think of this case. Would you rock a case with this display, or what would you do on the display if you did have the facility to do so? Don't forget to click on the subscribe button too whilst you're there if you haven't done so already, so that you don't miss out on lots more like this, and hopefully I'll get some more Hyte products in for review soon too. Well, it's been a pretty lengthy video this one with a fantastic product, but that's pretty much me done for now. I've been Gadget Joe, and this has been the insanely cool Hyte Y70 Touch, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.